I never thought I'd reach a point in my life where I'd feel completely unneeded, unappreciated, and, frankly, invisible in my own family. I had always prided myself on being a good father. I worked hard, sometimes too hard, so my son, Michael, could have opportunities one never had. I thought I had done it all right. But as I sit here, sipping the last cup of coffee in my quiet apartment, I realize that sometimes, doing everything right only gets you nothing. It all began when Michael, my only child, got married. Now, I don't know if anyone else has noticed, but when a man's child gets married, it's a little like watching someone hand over the most precious thing you've nurtured to someone else. And when that someone else turns out to be a woman who has zero respect for the man who raised your child, things get tricky. Michael's wife, Vanessa, was sharp. Too sharp, if you ask me. She was beautiful, and I mean that in the kind of way that made everyone notice her in the room, but her sharpness, her sense of entitlement, her constant, unending need to be at the center of every decision, was something that made my skin crawl. I tried to be supportive. I kept my opinions to myself, smiled politely at family dinners, and even offered help when she needed it. But nothing I did was ever enough. The first warning sign came the night before their wedding reception. I had spent hours helping Michael with the seating arrangements. I even drove to the venue to make sure the flowers arrived on time and helped the caterers set up the buffet. Michael thanked me, gave me a hug, and that was it. Vanessa, on the other hand, barely looked at me. She had this subtle, almost imperceptible smirk on her face, like she knew something I didn't, like she already owned the room, and by extension, my son, but I didn't think too much of it at the time. I chalked it up to pre-wedding stress. I thought, maybe she'll warm up to me once the honeymoon is over. I was wrong. The first major confrontation came a month after the wedding. I was invited to spend the weekend at their house. I had done so many things for Michael over the years: college tuition, helping him move into his first apartment, fixing his car more times than I could count, but apparently none of that mattered to Vanessa. She looked at me that Saturday morning and said, "Jack, we really appreciate everything you've done, but we like to handle things our own way now." That would have been fine if it hadn't been said in the most condescending tone imaginable, as if I were a guest in someone else's home instead of the man who had raised the person who invited me there. I smiled, nodded, and said, "Of course, Vanessa. I just want to help." But she shook her head like I was a bothersome fly, and that was when I realized I was no longer welcome as the man I had always been. Then came the ultimatum. It was one evening, a week later. Michael and I were watching the game, something we had done since he was a boy, and Vanessa barged in like a whirlwind. "Dad," she said, her eyes sharp, "you either help around the house and follow our rules, or you leave. Michael's made his choice, and so should you." Michael looked at me with that awkward expression he always gets when he's torn between two worlds. I knew he was afraid of conflict. He was raised to avoid it. But the words he spoke cut me deeper than any insult could. "Dad. She's right. You have to help out, or..." His voice trailed off, but I didn't need him to finish the sentence. I stared at him. The boy who used to run into my arms when he scraped his knee, the boy who used to sit on my lap and beg for one more bedtime story. He was telling me I was no longer welcome unless I obeyed his wife's rules. I felt a fire ignite inside me that I hadn't felt in decades. I looked at my suitcase in the corner of the living room, half packed for a weekend trip I hadn't even taken yet, and I knew my answer. "I'll take my suitcase," I said slowly. "I think you'll leave." Michael's face went pale. Vanessa's mouth opened, but no words came out. That was the moment I realized something crucial: respect isn't demanded, it's earned. And no one who treats me like furniture in my own home would earn mine again. I left that night. Just me, my suitcase, and a quiet determination. I didn't yell. I didn't slam doors. I just walked out, with every ounce of dignity I could muster. For weeks, I stayed away. I didn't answer Michael's calls. I didn't respond to Vanessa's messages. They assumed I was angry, sulking. Maybe I was. But mostly, I was planning. You see, I've always believed that revenge doesn't have to be loud to be effective. Sometimes, the quietest actions leave the deepest marks. I didn't want to humiliate them with public scenes or petty arguments. I wanted to do something that would make them truly understand the consequences of treating family like a disposable accessory. My plan began with research. I remembered that Michael and Vanessa had taken out a home loan for their new house, a sprawling place with more rooms than they would ever use, because Vanessa had insisted on it, claiming she needed space for inspiration. I contacted the bank under the guise of a financial advisor. I checked the terms of their mortgage, insurance policies, and even looked into a few legal loopholes regarding property rights. I wasn't a lawyer, and I didn't need to be. I just needed patience, observation, and leverage. The first domino fell when I started making subtle inquiries about their community association. The house, though beautiful, had some strict rules about ownership responsibilities. Vanessa had ignored a few minor regulations, thinking they were beneath her notice. I knew that if I reported them, carefully, strategically, it could trigger inspections and fines. But I didn't act immediately. I waited. I watched. Meanwhile, I rebuilt my life quietly. I rented a small apartment, started attending local community events, and even joined a senior woodworking club. Life was surprisingly pleasant without the constant stress of trying to please someone who never wanted to be pleased. I felt alive again, independent, unshackled. Then, the phone call came. Michael's voice trembled. "Dad. Something's happened. Vanessa. She's furious. She's calling everyone in the neighborhood. They're saying you reported the house." I chuckled softly, but only after hanging up. They had no idea who was behind it. The fines were legitimate, the violations were real. And yet, Vanessa's carefully constructed world was unraveling, and I didn't even have to lift a finger. Next came the social maneuvering. I knew Vanessa thrived on appearances, on the idea that she had total control. So, I made sure she lost that. Through quiet whispers in the right circles, through casual concerns expressed to mutual friends, the picture began to form. Vanessa wasn't the perfect, in-control woman everyone thought she was. She was volatile, demanding, and impossible to please. And guess who they started asking about? I never denied it. I just let the truth speak for itself. I remained calm, polite, and reasonable whenever anyone mentioned my name. I didn't attack her directly. I simply existed outside her chaos, a reminder that there was a world where respect and decency still mattered. The final act of my revenge, though I prefer to call it restoration of balance, came a few months later. Vanessa had thrown a dinner party, inviting the entire neighborhood, including the bank representatives and community association members. I got wind of it through mutual friends. I showed up. Not to fight. Not to humiliate. I showed up as myself, confident, composed, and, most importantly, completely independent. The moment she saw me walk through the door, her perfect mask faltered. She tried to greet me with a smile, but it was tight, brittle. I smiled back, genuinely, and said, "Good evening, Vanessa. It's lovely to see so many people here," and then I left her to her guests. I didn't argue, I didn't explain. But through the grapevine, everyone knew the truth. The man she tried to control had walked away, built his own life, and had become a figure of quiet admiration in the community. She had spent months trying to assert dominance, only to realize that respect cannot be forced, it must be given. Michael eventually came to me, humbled, realizing his father wasn't the man to push around. "Dad. I didn't understand," he said. I patted his shoulder. "Michael, it's not about understanding. It's about living." I chose my suitcase. That choice reminded me, and everyone else, what it means to have dignity. Vanessa never apologized. She never understood. But that's fine. Life has a funny way of balancing itself. She still lived in that house, still struggled to maintain appearances, still fumed quietly as she realized her grip on the world wasn't as tight as she thought. And me? I lived peacefully. I traveled, I painted, I built friendships that didn't require subservience or fear. I discovered a freedom I hadn't known I could have at 65. And every once in a while, when I think back on that day, I smile. Because sometimes, choosing the suitcase is the smartest and most powerful choice you can make. Life isn't about serving those who don't respect you. Life is about knowing your worth and standing by it, no matter the cost. I chose my suitcase. And that choice left everyone speechless, just as I intended, because the greatest revenge is living well without them.